This
to discuss
conference
the
will now
topic
be recorded.
on requirement prioritization. In today's session, what we will see is you would cover on what is prioritization, why prioritization, we would see importance of prioritization, then challenges, followed by factors that influence prioritization, elements of prioritization. Then we would see three most used prioritization technique in Agile and Waterfall methodology. All right. Before we start with the overview, I just want to keep in mind about a tea preparation. I would request everyone to relate a tea as your final product or application and the ingredients of tea as your requirements and the vessels or the substance used to prepare tea as your resources. Okay, now let's get started with the overview. Okay, what is prioritization? Prioritization is the process or activity to identify the relative importance of requirements or tasks so that they can be ranked or grouped based on the relative importance so that we can do right things in right order at right time.
Yeah, hi. Sorry to disturb. Vinod, can you go on mute? It's kind of coming double voice like when you talk. Sorry about that.
Okay. Is it fine now? Vijay,
Yeah, it's
am I
better.
audible?
Vinod, yes, yes, of course, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So continuing with the overview. So why do we need prioritization? Every one of us know that we have plenty of requirements or plenty of tasks whenever we start with developing a product or application. And we also know that not all requirements or tasks are important and everything cannot be developed at the same time. Hence, we have to arrange the requirements in order so that we will be able to plan and start working on the requirements. And prioritization is the key to that. So the prioritization helps us to arrange the requirements in order so that it helps us to maximize the value, improve the productivity, and also helps in effective planning so that we achieve what is required. Now let us consider our example of tea preparation. So what do you consider as the most important ingredients to prepare your tea? So we have tea powder, we have water, we have sugar, we have milk, or if you want to add flavor, you can add ginger or mint or cardamom as well. But in order for a minimum viable product, that is, what are the most important things to prepare a tea? We obviously require our tea powder and water and some material, a stove or something to heat water so that we will be able to boil the tea powder along with water so that we have our final ingredient tea. And rest of the others can be added to the tea while to prepare your tea, your tea powder and the water gets the most important priorities. Similarly, whenever you start with the application, we have to identify the most important things that are key to the development of the application so that we can develop a minimum viable product which is usable from which we can gain maximum value. Now, let's move on to the challenges in prioritization. So what is the challenge in prioritization? So the first challenge is we have conflict between stakeholders. Each stakeholder will have one requirement in their mind which they want to prioritize. And it occurs multiple times. Often we end up watching the conflict between stakeholders to bring up their requirements and develop them. There can be some scenarios where you will not be able to categorize requirements as low priority. Sometimes all the requirements shoot up as high priority requirements. In that case, we'll be confused which requirement to prioritize and which to not. And there can be another scenario where we would have started with developing a requirement and there come changes in the requirement. At that point of time, we'll also be blocked to proceed with the development. So we have several factors and we have elements with which we'll be able to overcome these challenges, prioritize a task, and we'll be able to maximize our values using prioritization. Let's move on to the next topic on factors that influence prioritization. The first factor that influences prioritization is benefit. Of course, whenever we start developing on a requirement or a task, we have to ensure that we get the most benefit out of it. And the benefit can be everything. It can be an advantage, or it can be a desired quality, or a strategic goal, or a business objective which the stakeholders want to achieve. And the second item which we have to consider while prioritization is risk. We have to ensure that the item that is prioritized has lesser risk and more benefits. Risk can also be anything. So risk can be a difficulty in implementation, or sometimes a stakeholder asks for a requirement, but that is not technically feasible. Sometimes our development team comes with a requirement that is not accepted by stakeholders. So we have to ensure that we take the task or the requirements which are lesser risk and more benefits. And the next factor is dependency. So dependency is the relation between requirements. We have to ensure that whenever one requirement is dependent on other, we prioritize both the requirements together so that we maximize the value or we achieve what we wanted to achieve. Say for example, there is a module for login page which has username and password, and forgot password is another module. So it's clear that the forgot password module is dependent on the login page. And hence, it is necessary that we take both the requirements so that we get maximum value, so that the login page helps the user to reset the password in case they forget the password. The next one is cost. So cost is the one which is always associated with the benefit. So whenever we start with a requirement, do anything, there is a cost associated to it. The cost is both the effort and the resources required to it. Effort in the sense it may be the team's effort, the developer, the QA, the business analyst effort, and the resource includes infrastructure, software, or anything associated with the development of the product or the application. And then comes time sensitivity. So time sensitivity is one of the important factors that influence the prioritization. Say, for example, let's consider FASTag implementation in all toll gates. So the government gave a deadline to all the toll gates to implement FASTag. So whenever the government gave a time, all the toll gates implemented FASTag before the time so that they are able to achieve what they want to. And also here the penalty and compliance is also associated with this time sensitivity. The government also issued a notice: if you are not going to install FASTag in your toll gate, then the vehicle can pass through the toll gate free and they are not going to pay you. So that is the penalty for the toll gate. So penalty can be something like a negative consequence of not implementing something. We can also consider our caller tune related to the COVID-19 that has been implemented in a cell phone. So whenever you call someone now, you can hear a caller tune saying that related to the COVID-19 case. It always says you to stay inside, to wash your hands. And even those things are part of compliance or penalty. So government has regulated the telecom companies to implement that to bring maximum awareness so that people would know about the COVID-19. And the final factor is the stability. So whenever we prioritize the requirement, we have to ensure that the requirement does not change. Hence, the stability plays a major factor in that. So stability is the likelihood of the requirement will not change. So whenever we work on the requirement, we ensure that we get the proper sign off from the users so that it doesn't change frequently and we avoid rework. And moving on to the elements of prioritization.
Hello, Vinod. I'm Mamta. Can I ask a question here?
Yeah, Mamta.
Yeah. Thank you for the session. It's been great. So I'm giving my example. Like I was having all the requirement and everything. I've implemented one of the key parts, but in the last session, like in the last moment, everything changed, and the requirement was given to another interface, but not to our project. So what do you think or suggest to me? Either is it the gap between the product owner and the BA, or is it are there any suggestions to overcome it? Like what would I have been done better to save the effort of that team and mine also?
Okay. So Mamta, if I understand the question, you are saying that you prioritize certain requirements, you developed it, but at the end, everything went, the project didn't go well. It went to some other people.
Yeah, it went to some different project.
Okay,
Project in the
okay,
sense it was related and it went to some different interface.
all right. Mamta, the challenge is first we have to understand the stakeholders. I hope even you know these things, but I'm just clarifying things. The first thing is we have to show the output to the stakeholders. Right, we are moving into Agile because of that reason, where we will be able to show the demo to the stakeholders so that they will be able to see the outcome of the product or outcome of the application. So when they see outcome of the application and when we come up with the minimum viable product, we get the feedback at that point of time. So minimum viable product is something we don't spend a lot of time, and we just take the most important requirements, we develop them and show to the client to get the feedback from their end. So once we get feedback on the minimum viable product, and if they're happy with the output and if they want to enhance the product, then it's fine. On the other case, if they're not happy at that point, they'll scrap the product. By doing so, we can ensure that we don't invest much on the product, and we also ensure that we get the right feedback and proceed with the feedback of the stakeholders rather than to implement or develop an entire application, then taking it to the client.
So do you think here some gap was there between the management and the BAs and product owners?
There could have been a gap.
Okay.
Thank you,
Okay.
Mamta.
Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Coming back to the elements of prioritization. So these elements of prioritization help us to prioritize things, right? So the first element is grouping. Grouping is something we segment the requirements. Say, for example, if you take our tea preparation, we classify the tea powder and water as high priority. Then the sugar and milk can take the medium priority, and other items like ginger, mint, which add flavor to the tea, can be categorized as lower priority. So grouping does not involve only high, medium, and low. We have several level of groupings. Say, for example, we have Cano analysis, we have Masco analysis. In case of Cano analysis, we prioritize the requirements based upon the customer satisfaction level. There are requirements which has to be implemented so that we keep the customer satisfied. There are requirements If not implemented, it will keep the customer dissatisfied. There are requirements, once you implement, the customer will get delighted. So we have to ensure that we do some kind of grouping so that we classify the requirements based on the priorities like high, medium, and low. Then the second element is ranking. Whenever we group requirements, right? Say for example, we have 10 requirements which are high priority. We cannot start working on all the 10 requirements at the same time. So we have to rank those requirements. We have to rank those requirements in a scale. You can take as a scale of 1 to 10. Usually in our office, how we do is we have 5 levels. So 0 are the requirements which is of top priority, and those requirements will directly go into development. We'll have 1 which are critical, which will be developed once the requirement in priority 0 is completed. Then we have requirements, we classify requirements as 2 or medium. Then we have requirement as 3, which where we say it may be low. Then we have 4, which says that it's not required. So ranking is also one of the key elements of prioritization, which will help us to identify which task or requirement goes first. Then the next item is time boxing. So we have grouped and we have ranked the requirements. How do we take the requirements? We have to analyze our team effort. We should know what's the strength of our team and what is the amount of work our team can deliver. Only if we have that estimation, we'll be able to rank and we'll be able to plan and keep the development going. If you're not able to analyze the effort of that is the resource that is involved in developing, then we may not be able to plan well. So even though you prioritize, and if your planning fails, then the development is obviously going to fail. And the last element is negotiation. So negotiation is establishing consensus among stakeholders and resolving conflicts. In the first slide, we saw about the challenges in prioritization. We saw a challenge wherein there can be conflict between stakeholders, there can be requirements that cannot be assigned a lower priority. In those cases, negotiation is the key element for prioritization. Just to say an example, we have like 3 guests in our home. So one of the guests asks for coffee, one guest asks for tea, and the another asks for a juice. All the 3 guests are important to us. But at the same time, we know we might not be able to provide them with coffee, tea, and juice. At that point of time, negotiation is the key skill which we have to convince the stakeholder and establish consensus so that they all agree to a common thing which benefit the company. Now let's go ahead with the prioritization techniques. We have n number of prioritization techniques. However, I have selected 3 prioritization techniques that are key and that has been used in most of the organization. So the first technique is Masco prioritization. In case of Masco prioritization, it's kind of a grouping concept wherein we group the requirements based on must do, should do, could do, and won't do. So the must do requirements are the most important and key tasks which are required to build a minimum viable product or to make something working. Without these requirements, a product or application cannot exist. So those requirements will be classified as M. And then comes S. So these are the should do requirements. These requirements are important but not as important as M, or they might be dependent on M. Only if you develop the requirements that are part of M, then only you will be able to develop S. So those kinds of requirements will be categorized as should do. They are important but has a low priority than M. Then we have could do. Could do is always good to have. It doesn't have any negative impact if it's not going to be developed. However, if it's developed, it might add certain value to the stakeholder or the user. Those kinds of requirements are usually classified as could do. And final one we have is won't do. In case of won't do, it's not required to do it. Even if you develop those requirements, it's not going to help you or it's not going to add any value to your application. Considering with the tea example what we saw, again I would assign the tea powder and water as the must do. So only if we have the tea powder and water and only if it's boiled, then only we will be able to add sugar or milk for taste. Without the tea powder and the water, even having the sugar and milk, you won't be able to prepare a tea. And C is could do, nice to have. Obviously, if you want to add any flavor to your tea, like adding a ginger tea or a mint tea, then yes, I would assign ginger and mint to C. And won't do. W is something is not required. Say for example, if I have a requirement called salt, salt is not required for me to prepare a tea. So assign W so that I don't even consider taking it. And moving to the next technique is the priority matrix. So we have several kinds of matrix: value cost matrix, Eisenhower matrix, effort and impact matrix, and number of matrix which the organization can build based on their analysis. But most commonly used matrix are the value cost matrix and Eisenhower matrix. And it's not easy to build a value cost matrix because it involves a lot of analysis. It involves a lot of financial calculation and financial analysis to identify the value of a requirement and also to identify the cost involved in a requirement. So once if you have a strong financial analysis team, then you can go ahead with the value cost matrix, wherein you have the value on y-axis and the cost on x-axis. And you have 4 quadrants. So the first quadrant, what you see is high value and low cost. Usually we prioritize the requirements which have high value and low cost. And then the second quadrant is high value and high cost. Though the cost is high, it's going to provide us high value. So I'm going to invest in the requirement to ensure that I get high value. And then the next set of requirements, what I would take is a low value and low cost requirement. Though the value is going to be low, the cost of implementing the requirement is also low. So I would give it a try to build or implement the requirement so that I can get some value out of it. And considering the last quadrant, low value and high cost, I was never going to develop that because it involves high cost. However, I'm not going to get any value out of it. In the similar way, we also have Eisenhower matrix. In case of Eisenhower matrix, it does not have any financial calculation, but it mostly have a discussion with your stakeholder, or it can be based on compliance or time sensitivity. In case of Eisenhower matrix, I classify importance as a y-axis and urgency or time sensitivity as x-axis. Again, the first quadrant, what I would prioritize is the requirements that fall under important and urgent. The second thing what I would consider is I would take the requirements which are important but not urgent. And the third thing what I would consider is urgent but important. And the final thing is not urgent nor important. So I can work on those requirements leisurely. And the last technique which we are going to see is weighted ranking technique. In case of a weighted ranking, we come up with a list of factors. Say, for example, we can consider all the factors which we saw in the slide number 3 that factors affect prioritization. So those can be a criteria, and each criteria will be assigned a weight. And then we have the requirements, and each requirement will be assigned a score. So on this figure, you can see there is a criteria which has value, risk, difficulty, success, compliance, relationship, and stakeholders. And each of this criteria is assigned a weightage. And then we have requirements. Say, for example, we have requirements A, B, C, D, and E. And each requirement has been assigned a score for each of the criteria. And finally, what we do is we multiply the score of each requirement along with the weightage of the each factor. And then finally, we come up with the score. So whichever score is high, we assign the highest rank to that. So we prioritize the task which has the highest rank. And by this way, we ensure that we take the task which has the highest priority and the highest value. I believe I pretty much covered what I want to. I think we have 3 more minutes left. I would want to quickly summarize whatever we covered today. So we saw an overview of prioritization. In the overview, we saw what is prioritization. So prioritization is an activity or a process to identify the relative importance and rank or group the task based on the importance. And why prioritization is required. So prioritization is required because we cannot develop all the tasks, or we cannot classify all the requirements or as important. So we need to identify the requirements that are important and that are critical for the success of a product or application. Then we saw about factors that influence a prioritization. So we had several factors like benefit, risk, cost, dependency, time sensitivity, compliance, and stability, which should be considered while prioritizing requirements. And then we saw elements of prioritization, how prioritization can be grouped. So we saw grouping, ranking, time boxing, and negotiation as elements of prioritization. And finally, we saw about the prioritization techniques, where we saw about Moscow prioritization, priority matrix, and weighted ranking. Hope everyone enjoyed this session. And now we are open to queries. If you have any questions, we can post it.
Hello, Vinod. Mamta here.
Yes, Manta.
Yeah, can you please go back to the last screen?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. So I was going through these criteria. Can you please help me to understand these criteria as like some of the criteria I'm not getting it properly. Like I'm going one by one. Like value is
Sure.
what is the, yeah, what is the value of that particular project or how much benefit it will give to the business. Risk is the what is the risk? If it can be feasibility risk, it can be your technical risk. Difficulty, like in terms of implementation of it, like, right, this it's
Correct.
related to risk. Yeah. And then success, it's like it's success whatever you are going to implement, and it has a major success percentage. And compliance, if I'm not getting it wrong, it's like compliance of like with the login and everything, it's with the GDPR and everything, with the security
Yes.
policies.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. And there is like this is relationships, right?
Correct.
So there are two criteria: relationship and stakeholders. So I just wanted to
Right.
know the difference between the two.
So stakeholder is what is the value it adds for the stakeholder, and relationship is dependency between the requirements. So what is the percentage of dependency it has on other requirements? So whenever the dependency is more, you tend to prioritize the requirements. And also stakeholders, whenever the interest of the stakeholder is more on a particular requirement, we take that requirement so that we keep the stakeholders satisfied.
Okay, so relationship here is like the coordination between the teams and everything, and stakeholders. We can also prioritize stakeholders, like we can prioritize the stakeholder of A rather than B, right?
So relationship is like, say for example, as I explained, like let's take a login screen. So in
Mm-hmm.
case of requirement A, we define the functionality for username and password. And say for example, B, we define the functionality for the forgot password. So the requirement A has a higher dependency. So only if you implement the requirement B along with A, you get the highest value. So these are the requirements which are critical, and most of the requirements are dependent on them. So only if you implement these requirements, then only you will be able to implement other requirements. If you're not able to implement the requirements which has the highest relationship value, then there are requirements which are dependent on them, then even you won't be able to focus on those requirements.
Yeah, got
And
it,
in
got
case of stakeholder, it's a stakeholder interest. Say for example, let's consider a sorting feature in application. And
it.
we know that operations team always used to have a feature for sorting. And consider a feature, uh, say for example, highlighting. And operations team is not more interested in highlighting a row or a column, how they would like to sort the column. So we assign the highest score to requirement A, which is sorting, which is 80%, so that the stakeholder interest is more on that. And if that requirement is implemented, the stakeholder will get more benefited. Whereas there might be a requirement B, where the stakeholder might have a lesser interest and it does not any impact on the stakeholder.
Okay. And the
Yeah, I
last
want to add here, Shirish here. Just I want to add a question with the Mamta. So actually, some of the times what happen, as you suggested, the matrix, priority matrix, the high prioritization and low prioritization, and with respect to the cost. But sometimes what happen, as the client know that they have a low prioritization and the low cost is incurred, but still they have they means as far as the interdepartmental requirements are concerned. So sometimes interdepartmental requirements are going to be the clash with each other, and they are thinking that their requirements are quite important. So this is happening real time scenarios I'm sharing with you. So this is happening most of the time. So how miss we are going to make the things happen in that?
Right.
right.
So we have an element called negotiation. We have to negotiate. We have to have data
No,
points. We have to do
yeah,
a
miss. Yeah, yeah, it's okay, miss. As far as the negotiation in terms of cost, that is fine. But as far as the prioritization, as you said, suggested that. But sometime, most of the time, what happened as far as the prioritization or concern is concerned. So most of the time, it is not going to be the high value. That is a low value, but still they are the stakeholders, not as super users, they are asking for users or super users they are asking for, and stakeholder is not going to be the going to consider at a high priority or he is interested. So this internal client clashing is going to be the happen as far as the prioritization is concerned. So how you are
right,
going to be, yeah.
right. So that's where I said like we can take a say for example, if you have two requirements, one is of low value and low cost, then the another requirement has say for example high value and high cost, right? You can create a weighted ranking matrix for that. You can show them the value, you can show them the dependencies, and you can show them the cost involved in all the thing. So once you did your analysis correct, and once you build your weighted ranking matrix, you can take it forward with your project manager, or even a level about your project manager, that is your director or vice president. You can explain it to them, stating requirement B has the higher value when considered about requirement A. You can show them the analysis, and you can add the data points to them, so that you gain consensus with all the stakeholders and you prioritize the task which has higher value.
Applicable, okay. This is applicable for AMC also, or we have some other methodologies for the AMC.
Sorry, I didn't get that question.
This prioritization matrix is applicable for AMC also. AMC means the fixed cost is occurred. Means there is a no change. Means there is a no change in the cost if the requirements are going to be the change or like that.
Definitely, definitely. So when we consider
Okay.
requirements, right? So it's like there can be some features or some enhancements that are key to a product. Without those
Mhm.
features or enhancement, the product won't have much value. And there can be requirements which do not have a value to the product. So
Okay,
obviously, when
as
you
you
have,
suggested that.
yeah,
Just let yeah. As you suggested that actually the means we have to make the internal discussion with respect to the project manager or like that our team scrum master or sometimes with the higher management. But what most of the times what I experienced like that our management or our team, the implementation team or like the service provider team is ready for all these things. Is all to make the things happen, but client is not going to be the ready for according to the process or methodologies. Whatever maybe he said that he sometimes he can understand that that is a low cost as well as low prioritization requirement is there, but still he needed. So how we have to how we have to convince them, that is the most important and difficult task, I think.
of course, it's most important, Sirish. Like as I said, so once you, the first item, what I would do is I would do my analysis and I would get my data points correct. And the second item, what I would do is I would try to negotiate it with all the internal stakeholders, explaining about the data points and explaining about the value that we get out of what we do. And the third thing, what I do is, in case if it's not going to help, I'm going to escalate. So I'll be escalating it to my supervisor, or it can be my vice president, or I take it forward with my client. I hope if we follow this process, we would be able to convince our internal stakeholders, or at the worst case, if you're not able to convince them, so once we escalate, and if you're able to show the value what we are going to bring, I believe whatever we prioritize, our prioritization is going to get accepted, and we are going to get consents from everyone.
Okay. Okay, fine. Thank you. But we have any any tools or any methodologies for this prioritization?
You can use the three techniques. So we have the Moscow prioritization. We use priority matrix. We have weighted ranking. So once you use all these things, you would be able to come up with the final list of priorities.
No, no. Yes, you are saying that these are techniques, but I'm asking about the tools or any is like the any applications or like that, or any processes.
Uh, Application, I'm not sure. So you have
Mhm,
in almost all the applications, you have a placeholder for priority,
mhm.
irrespective of whether it's Jira or it's Fogbugs or any other tool. You have a place to enter the priority for the application, but you won't be able to calculate the priority of requirements. I haven't seen a tool like that.
Yeah, actually, most of the time we are using the Excel as well as questionnaires and the others and the very generic processes for the prioritization and to requirement gathering. So that's why I'm asking any specific tools or any something is available for the requirement gathering prioritization. No, I think.
We can definitely check, Sirish. Okay, let me check with my colleagues. But up to my knowledge, I'm not sure of any tool that is being used for prioritization. In case if I
Hmm.
get anything, I'll let you know for sure.
Fine, fine. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Sirish. Any other questions?
Yeah, hi, Mamta this side.
Yeah, Mumta.
Okay, so I was again going through these criteria. So value and urgency, I know these are different. Like value is something which is benefited by the business, and urgency is very critical. Is any there point of time that these value and urgency can be same?
Yeah, definitely it can be seen.
Okay,
Say in case of the FASTag implementation, right? So the FASTag implementation has highest value as urgent. So in that case, value and urgent carries the same weight.
sorry, Vinod. Can you repeat it? I missed your sentence last time.
So we spoke about the FASTag implementation in all toll gates, right? The FASTag implementation came as an urgent requirement as well as it adds more value to the community. So it carries equal importance of value as well as urgency.
Okay, okay. So there is one basic question, like apart from prioritization. So can I ask it?
Sure, sure, go ahead.
So while dealing with business stakeholders, we also have many questions. Like we also want their suggestions, like suggestions from business stakeholders. So is it the right approach uh, to like close the meeting with the open-ended question, or it should be always close-ended statement with the BA?
You can actually classify the questions. You can have a list of open-ended questions to the users, as well as you can also have a list of closed-ended questions as well. And also, what I suggest is whenever you're going to ask any suggestion to business users, first tell what's there in your mind. Provide your suggestion and ask them how this can be taken forward, so that they'll let you know. So in that way we ensure that we provide a value to the client, and also we ensure that we are making them think and get what we require.
Okay, and if the business stakeholders are interrelated and we want to have one particular decision based on the all suggestions or all questions, how can we deal with it? Like different business stakeholders on different reasons, but with the same question.
So one thing what we might have to do is we should have different phrases for the same question. Say there can be a business user, there can be a technical user. So we have to understand who the stakeholders are. We have to frame the questions, and we have to think from their point of view how they take those questions. Whenever we go to such meetings, we have to be prepared and we have to be equipped so that we ask the right questions to the right stakeholder.
So again,
And we
I'm going
speak.
back to my question here. So sorry to interrupt here. So when I'm going with the like questioning and everything, I'm referring to the business stakeholders from different regions, or only the business stakeholders, but they do have a different point of view.
Right. So if they have a different point of views, it always good to note all those points. We can do a little bit of analysis, like which one brings the maximum value to the company. Whenever it comes to the value, we have to consider the value to the company and not the value to the individual stakeholders. So once we go over analysis and once we have a data points ready on which item is going to add maximum value to the company, and irrespective of whether it adds value to other stakeholders or not, we will implement the item which adds maximum value to the company. And once we get back to them with the data points, I'm pretty sure that none of the stakeholders is going to object it.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, one question from my side, Vinod. Actually, these techniques are prioritization techniques are applicable for which methodologies, for like for example agile or other waterfall or other methodologies.
You can apply these techniques in both agile and waterfall. Say for example, in case of agile, you'll have several backlogs. You'll have like 50 backlogs, 60 backlogs logs. And if you use Moscow prioritization or priority matrix, I'm pretty sure that out of the 50 backlogs, you'll be able to have 10 backlogs as must do, like 10 backlogs as should do, and rest can be could and would. And once you identify the must to do backlogs, then you can use the weighted ranking to rank all those backlogs based on the weightage. So once you do that, you will be able to assign priorities and develop them accordingly. Similarly, in case of waterfall, you would have identified all the requirements in your initial stage, and when you apply the same matrix, say for example, it can be a Eisenhower matrix, or it can be a Moscow prioritization, or any other grouping technique where you identify a set of requirements which are key for building a product. So once you identify a set of requirements which are key, then you rank it. So once you rank, you can set your development in that order of ranking, and you can start with the development.
Okay, thank you, Vinoth. And is there any
Thank you.
reference? What is the reference point for this priority? What is the prioritization reference point?
I'm sorry, Sirish, I didn't follow that question.
I'm asking what is the reference points for the different reference points for this
Reference point
prioritization?
where I took all the details.
Sorry,
References.
pardon. Can you
You are
please?
asking about reference material from where all
Yeah,
I
yeah,
took
yeah.
these
Reference
details.
material or
Okay.
any kind. Yeah.
Babok is one of the reference. There are even there are some items which I took in real time, which I do in my office. Say, for example, the priority matrix is the one which we follow, and was followed by weighted ranking. So once we have listed out the high value and low cost items, then we use the weighted ranking method. So these things I got it from my organization, and of course
No, no.
Moscow
I'm
prioritization.
asking about, no, I'm not asking about the documents or other things. Documents, Babok, I'm not asking about backwards.
Okay,
I'm just
okay,
about means if we have to find out, we have to take a factor or criteria for the like a weighted ranking or for the low or high value. Means how to find out the value whether it is high or low. Correct. So
right, right, right,
my question is like
right.
that:
Okay,
what is
okay,
the reference to take these values and from the
right.
requirement
So
gathering? Obviously, it
I
is from the
I
requirement
understand.
gathering.
I understand.
Yeah.
So we have several estimation techniques, Sirish. So one of the key estimation technique is financial analysis. So once you do financial analysis, you will be able to identify the value and cost for each of the tasks.
If you have that techniques with you, so can you please share with all of us?
Financial analysis. Let me check if I have any material related to that. Definitely, I'll share. Yeah.
Anything, whatever may be the any techniques you have, apart from
It's
including
there
this
Sure,
in
sure,
priority.
BA
Sirish.
Growth
I'll,
also. It's there in BA Calc.
Okay, fine.
Good evening, Vinoth. May I ask a question, please?
sure, sure.
First, many thanks for picking on this training. I think this is going real great. So, my question is in regards to context of Agile. Considering we are building an e-commerce website, and I have 5 sprints been distributed in 5 features, such as a home page, and then landing page, product list, payment. So, I have these 5 features. and 5 sprints been allocated to each feature. My question from a prioritization standpoint is, considering we are prioritizing all high requirement items, high value and high risk items on a priority list. So will the priority items from each feature will come on sprint one? For example, will all the priority items will feature in sprint one, and all the low prioritized items will feature on sprint five? Is it the first case, or the second case is, will we build, or will we pick prioritize requirements based on the feature? For example, for landing page, I'm picking one priority item, putting it in sprint one. The second priority item for for feature two will go on sprint two. So how does this really work in real time scenario, Vinod?
Yeah, Jay. So to answer your question, like what I would do is, so first, as everyone do, I would try to identify the items which has the topmost priorities. Say for example, if you, I would consider building a homepage. If it's an e-commerce website, for me, my homepage is the topmost priority, right? So I would build a homepage, and then one of the bottommost priority is listing of items. Listing of low priority items can be one of the least priorities. I would also check the dependency of the lower priority items that has on the higher priority items. Say for example, listing of features is a low priority item, but only if I'm able to list the features in the homepage, then only the customers will be able to select the feature or product, and then only they will be able to purchase it. So all have to check the dependency of the.
I think voice is not coming from the Vinoth. Can you
Okay,
able to
okay.
hear?
Yeah, yeah, Sirish. So, am I not audible for the entire time, or
I
is
think
there
we
some?
missed a bit of the point here. You know.
Okay, so I was saying about the concept called storyboarding. So in Agile, we have a concept called storyboarding, where we group a similar task and the tasks that are dependent on each other. So when you do a storyboarding, say for example, if you can consider a homepage as epic because it's uh, bigger task, and in homepage we can have smaller pieces like having a banner, then we can have sections to list your products, then you can have sections to provide promotional content. We have several sections, so each section can be considered as a backlog, and you cover everything that are grouped together, and you assign it to a sprint or subsequent sprint, so that you get maximum value out of it and you achieve what you want. Did I answer your question,
So
Jay?
that answers many thanks, Vinod. Absolutely well.
Thanks.
Thanks, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Vinod, for this call. It's already 10:25. We'll close this.
Thank you, Vijay.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you,
Thank you,
Vinoth.
Vijay.
Well,
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Vijay and Vinoth.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Vijay.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you, Vinod.